In the last episode, we saw the meteoric rise of Liu Bei after the Battle of Red Cliff and the establishment of the Three Kingdoms. With the death of major characters like Guan Yu, Cao Cao, and Liu Bei, the narrative focus of Romance of the Three Kingdoms has shifted to Shu Han's Prime Minister, Zhuge Liang. In this episode, we will look at Zhuge Liang's struggle to unite the empire as he faced his arch-rival, Sima Yi. After the death of Liu Bei, his eldest son became the new emperor. And right on the first year of his reign, Liu Shan had to face the crisis of Wei army attacking them from 5 directions. Zhuge Liang, help! Obviously, the weak-willed Liu Shan couldn't have survived a single day if not for Zhuge Liang doing all the work for him. And as it turned out, the problem had already been solved by the loyal Prime Minister. In this arc of the novel, Zhuge Liang became the central character. Unlike the warrior kings and invincible generals in the previous arcs, he had a more holistic view towards war, and intimate knowledge on the nature of organization and alliances. So he explained to his young lord what he had done. First of all, the massive army sent by Wei was actually a loose collection of armies organized by a mastermind from the kingdom of Wei. All of them had their personal goals and conflicting loyalties. The Qiang tribesmen from the north respected General Ma Cao, who used to be garrisoned in the region, so he was sent to defend the pass to make them hesitate to attack. The Nanman people, who were less sophisticated, can be easily bamboozled by optical illusions, so Wei Yan was instructed to move his soldiers deceptively. Uncertain of what they are dealing with, they will not make their move. The enemy general, Meng Da, has a friend who works for Su, so he forged a letter from his friend to persuade him to stay still. He is going to pretend to be sick. Wei's own central army will be prevented from advancing by General Zhao Yun, who was ordered to guard an easily defensible pass. Finally, the last division from the Kingdom of Wu will only move if the other 4 armies made significant progress. Last time they collaborated with Wei and moved their army, they were backstabbed by a Wei invasion, so there was little trust between them. With Wu refusing to send their army and the lack of success displayed by their counterparts over time, the coalition floundered and broke apart. Angered by Wu's inaction, Wei even launched a war against them. Taking personality, psychology, deception, terrain, diplomacy, and other variables into account, the depths of Zhuge Liang's warfare went beyond the battlefield into a realm of its own. That is why the story started to take a different tone with him as main character, and you will see a lot more epic letter sending rather than battlefield bravado. Before Zhuge Liang could launch his big project, however, he had to do a bit of housekeeping. He re-established Shu Han's alliance with Wu and spent time pacifying the southern part of the kingdom from the Nanman tribal raiders. He captured the Nanman leader Meng Huo 7 times and released him 7 times. He only submitted on the 8th defeat. Zhuge Liang also created autonomous regions for them so that they can rule themselves. This policy may sound weird, but this action is based on the Confucian principle called 以德服人, which means convincing others by virtue. By showing them mercy and benevolence, the Nanman tribes stopped raiding and lived peacefully with them from then on. On the way back, a stormy river blocked his way. To calm the storm, he was advised to sacrifice 49 human heads. Not wanting to harm innocent folks, he wrapped animal meat in flour dough and sacrificed those instead. Apparently, it worked! And this is also part of the folk legend of how meat buns, or mantou, was invented. Now that the south is pacified, Zhuge Liang could finally concentrate on the north. He presented a memorial to his ruler to launch a northern campaign. Since Shu Han claimed to be the successor of the Han dynasty, which was overthrown by Cao Wei, defeating Wei is paramount to their legitimacy, so a conflict with them is inevitable. Not only that, the Central Plains, which Wei occupied, had more land and better economy than the Shu region. They even have the access to the Silk Road, so in the long run, they would be able to build a bigger and stronger army. So Zhuge Liang had no choice but to try to conquer Wei as soon as possible, even if all the odds were stacked against him. The campaign was approved, but before he embarked, he had to get rid of his main obstacle. so he listened to his assistant Ma Su's suggestion and spread rumors that Sima Yi was plotting a rebellion. The plot worked, and the new ruler of Wei, Cao Rui, dismissed him from his office. Even with his nemesis neutralized, conquering Wei wasn't going to be easy, especially when 4 of the 5 tiger generals had died. Ma Cao had recently died due to illness, and Zhao Yun was in his 70s. The rest of his personnel were composed of a new generation of warriors and the rebellious Wei Yan, who suggested that they attack Chang'an head-on. Denied. Being a cautious strategist, Zhuge Liang had his own ideas. The initial part of his campaign was a success, until they met a brave and resourceful Wei general, Jiang Wei. Apparently, he saw through some of Zhuge Liang's ambushes and even managed to beat back Zhao Yun. Impressed by his talent, Zhuge Liang went through a lot of trouble to capture and recruit him. This young man would be his protege. Because Zhuge Liang treated those who surrendered to him well, many cities surrendered without even a fight. Alarmed by this, Wei sent out their elite soldiers led by General Cao Zhen, accompanied by Senior Minister Wang Lang. Wang Lang rebuked the whippersnapper Zhuge Liang for daring to defy the kingdom established by Cao Cao, who acted according to the heaven's will. Zhuge Liang laughed at him and replied with some of his most lethal barbs. The house of Liu of the Han dynasty was destroyed by treacherous corruptors. You who had pledged to serve the Han Empire turned out to be nothing more than a fawning serpent of the usurpers. A sycophant like you should learn to hide your face, because with your advanced age, you will soon see the 24 Han Emperors. How do you even dare to face them in the underworld? Be gone, you old crook! You! Wang Lang died of anger and frustration, and became another victim of Zhuge Liang's trolling. Not even this new reinforcement could defeat Zhuge Liang. However, the tide of war changed pretty soon. Zhuge Liang's accomplice in Wei, Meng Da, who was about to launch a rebellion, had his plot discovered and executed. Apparently, his adversary had returned to power. The crisis their kingdom faced had led to Sima Yi's reappointment. This is bad news, Zhuge Liang thought. The first thing he needed to do was to secure his supply route to the west, in Jieting. Now who shall he send for this important mission? Me! Ma Su volunteered. He has read all the books of war, so he knew what to do. Zhuge Liang wasn't sure about this, but he eventually agreed to his request, and ended up making the worst mistake of his life. Ma Su was an overconfident fool. He was very quickly overrun by Wei's veteran general, Zhang He. Then Sima Yi and the other generals jostled with each other towards Zhuge Liang's base. The meritocratic nature of Cao Wei's administration had led to a toxic work environment where everyone tried to outdo each other. So despite fighting a common external enemy, he also had to worry about his ambitious colleagues. Now imagine how lucky he thought he was when he saw Zhuge Liang sitting alone on top of a city playing a zither, all defenseless. Easy victory! Not. He is no fool. Sima Yi knew something was up. All 4 city gates were open. The city itself looked empty, but there are soldiers dressed as street sweepers. What trick could Zhuge Liang be playing? Is this a bluff? Sima Yi hesitated. Then again, Zhuge Liang was a careful strategist. He wouldn't be risking himself unless he had a solid strategy. What if... No! Retreat! Soon enough, Sima Yi heard the war drums of the Su army behind him. Ha! An ambush! So he was right. Sima Yi had once again outsmarted Zhuge Liang, he thought. However, a few days later, he discovered that Zhuge Liang had retreated. His campaign had actually collapsed after the defeat of Ma Su, and there were only around a couple thousand of soldiers inside the city against his own 150,000. Apparently, the drummers turned out to be decoys too. That was a good trick. He was no match for Zhuge Liang, he sighed. Over at the other side, with a heavy heart, Zhuge Liang had to maintain army discipline by executing Ma Su. He then demoted himself to take responsibility for his failure. Never again will he come this close to success. The opportunity to attack Wei soon presented itself again, after the force of Wu under Lu Xun defeated Wei to the east. This time, Zhuge Liang embarked without a single tiger general, as Zhao Yun had died before the start of the campaign. This campaign was another failure due to the lack of supplies. On the third campaign, he arranged a joint attack with Wu, but this unreliable ally did not hold their end of the bargain, so they failed again. General Zhang Bao died in service here. Obviously, Wei wasn't just going to sit there and let itself get attacked all the time, so they launched a counterattack. But due to the rough terrain and weather, they had to turn back. This provided Zhuge Liang with the opportunity to hit their rear, and he launched the fourth campaign. He dealt a heavy blow to his enemy's army and finished the bedridden Cao Zhen off by sending him an insulting letter. But unfortunately, he had to return to the capital to clear his name because Sima Yi had spread rumors that he was planning a rebellion. Here, Zhuge Liang could see the influence of eunuchs and corrupt officials starting to take hold in court. Su Han was starting to develop the same cancer that ruined the Han dynasty they are trying to revive. Yeah, it's becoming pretty sad, man. He was practically the only minister in the kingdom trying to do the right thing. The novel just grew increasingly melancholic from here on. After building his resources for 3 years, Zhuge Liang launched his final campaign. Despite bad omens and the death of Guanzhong due to illness, he was still committed to fulfill his duty. This time, the Wu army will be acting in concert. Zhuge Liang and Sima Yi fought long and hard with deceptions and inventions, so the latter shifted to a defensive position. Since the Wu army was defeated in the east, there was less pressure for Sima Yi, so he's going to just turtle there. He didn't need to be smarter than Zhuge Liang, he just needed to be wiser. But one day, he received intel that his enemy's camp was left undefended, so he seized upon this chance and rode out. Lo and behold, he regretted not sticking to his original plan, because he walked right into a fire trap. He and his sons almost died there, but as if the heavens was on his side, a torrential rain came and extinguished the fire. To Zhuge Liang's dismay, it looked as if the heaven itself had denied him a victory. After this, Sima Yi just stuck with his defensive position. That's it, he is done facing Zhuge Liang. Zhuge Liang had no way of beating him unless he comes out. And Zhuge Liang knew it too, so he had been taunting Sima Yi every day to do that. He even sent him a women's dress. Even if Sima Yi could bear this insult, his officers had had enough. So he asked the messenger how Zhuge Liang was doing. The messenger replied that his master wakes up early, works hard, attends to all matters, and eats very little. How diligent, Sima Yi thought. Zhuge Liang couldn't survive long like this. Soon, Sima Yi received the report that the Su army camp had moved away from Wei. Could this be? No, he shouldn't be rash. But then he received news that Zhuge Liang's camp was moving further and further away, as if they are retreating. This has to be it! Zhuge Liang is dead, as predicted. Sima Yi immediately rushed to strike their camp. With his arch-nemesis gone, the Su army was his to crush. But then suddenly, he saw the enemy army readily turned around and poised in a fighting formation. On top of the hill, he saw his worst nightmare. Not again! It is Zhuge Liang's trap! Sima Yi finally turned his army around, and the ensuing stampede to escape claimed many Wei soldiers' lives. It would take a few days for him to realize that this was another ruse. Zhuge Liang had indeed died, but even in death, he was able to outsmart a living Sima Yi. Sadly, this loyal minister was unable to fulfill his master's goal to unify the country. But before his death, he had laid out a detailed plan to help the Su army retreat safely. He entrusted Jiang Wei with his books and blueprint for repeating crossbow. He appointed his ministerial successors and even prepared secret plans for them to carry out. When General Wei Yan rebelled on their journey home, it was also within his prediction. The secret plan ordered Ma Dai to cut him from the back. And once again, Zhuge Liang saved his kingdom from a crisis even after his death. With him gone and the kingdom falling into a downward spiral, many adaptations would just stop here, because the last 15 chapters is just too depressing. But if you want to know how Romance of the Three Kingdoms really ends, then keep watching. The next episode is the end of the Three Kingdoms. Be sure to subscribe and like the video so that you don't miss it. If you like what we are doing, then you can support us on Patreon. Until next time, stay cool, my bros.